So I'd love to just find out a little bit more about like yourselves, your roles, and kind of like a 5-minute intro. That'd be awesome.
I'm Emily. So I work at Jumpstart, which is pretty much an early careers accelerator. We are in a very fortunate position. We get like roughly 5,000 applicants every single month to join our Jumpstart program. We basically put in a bunch of stuff so that we end up, instead of going from 5,000, we get the top 50, so the top 1% of all applicants. Wow. And then we do this really exciting thing called Spotlight Week, where we invite the 40 of the most exciting UK startup founders to come and pitch their role, their company, their culture to the candidates over Zoom. And it's really fun. It's basically like Dragon's Den. And both myself and Sinead actually came through the program before working at Jumpstart. So we've actually experienced it from the candidate side and loved it enough to kind of join Jumpstart as a result. In terms of kind of where I sit within the Jumpstart business, so basically as and when candidates land a role via Jumpstart, they gain access to the Jumpstart alumni community. That is like a core element to my role. So that's 450 plus incredibly bright, ambitious people, all working within early stage startups within London. And a lot of what I do is around, firstly, they're like giving all of these incredibly cool young people their own startup network. We work with very early stage startups. So to be able to give people their like a broader network of colleagues, if you will, that like kind of get what you're going through and like how to navigate the startup world is like really key. Big part of that for me is events. So I think this year alone, I think we've done like 4 or 5 100-person events. And then we had to take a pause from that because what we'll go on to in a minute is rolling out an 1,000-person event.
You're doing your own big conference at this point.
yeah. Next year we're talking 10,000. We like to 10 it. But yeah, and then beyond that as well, we do a lot around actually supporting candidates within their role and like really helping them get the progression that they want. A lot of the reason why people join startups is because you can progress very fast within a short space of time. So we do that by giving people startup mentors, so like founders, COOs, CEOs, and also as well like a bunch of additional kind of like startup-y training. That's basically me.
Awesome. And Sinead?
I'm Sinead. Won't go into Jumpstart because Emily's done a great job of that. But I am the marketing and growth person at Jumpstart, and essentially kind of have 2 main parts to my role. The first part is helping to find brilliant candidates for our streams, and then the second part is finding startups, although I do a little bit less work there at the moment, but that will probably become an increasing priority. And then excitingly, I am now working quite a lot with Emilie on events and kind of supporting her on events. We're all one-man bands when it comes to our teams. Wow. It's been really nice to like collaborate a bit with Emilie and like hopefully kind of do some exciting marketing around events. Awesome. And as Emilie mentioned, kind of came through the program and joined another startup way back when, where I went in as their only marketing person again. Very much just like jumped in the deep end, winged it. And then have come back to Jumpstart and have been here for a year and a half. No, a year this week, actually.
A year in startup feels like about 10. So it's a big milestone. Just a quick intro on my side. So I head up marketing here at Arcane. And this is part of it. Why I really wanted to talk to you guys is, first of all, I think what Jumpstart is doing, I wish I had something like that when I was, starting in startups. Like it really resonated with me in terms of like, the kind of resources that you get. And when I first joined, like that was almost 10 years ago, I was so underqualified in terms of what I thought startup life would be. And it turned out to be, I had nobody to talk to in terms of like, I was just like working and learning pretty much Saturdays and Sundays. I was catching up on all the stuff that I pretended I knew. Basically just, figuring out as I went. So that's first of all, and obviously because of the whole 5K event, that kind of brought it to my attention. Like I thought it was brilliant. So I'd love to dive in a little bit more into that event, and if you could just tell me about the process of like why you chose to do that, and what was the process of, you know, putting it all together. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I think on both of those things, the process of deciding to do it, we have two incredible co-founders at Jumpstart. I would say that Matthew is the ideas man, the big ideas man. And it was literally as simple as 2 months ago, we were walking to lunch. He was like to me, oh, you know, like JP Morgan are doing their corporate run in like 6 weeks. I feel like startups love running. Like, do you think we could just do the same but better? And I was there like, yeah, 6 weeks might be a push. He's like, yeah, let's just do it on the same day. And I was like, okay, I'll have a think. And then so the idea came from Matthew, very simply. And then the process of rolling it out was like a little bit more complex. So yeah, I mean, first things first, what you always want to work out is that like, is this even possible? Chat GPT, big friend, when it comes to trying to work out complex things, aka trying to actually just find details from London councils. So
I bet you didn't have that on your bingo list of like job description.
Yeah, how on earth you get in contact with like Hyde Park? But yeah, literally got a list of all of the numbers, all of the contact details, called up absolutely everyone, and got laughed out the door. They were there like, even if you want 499 people there, it's looking like a 6 months wait list in order to get all of the documentation over. So yeah, it was a little bit more complex than we realized. And yeah, a bit of a realization that we wouldn't have been able to do it on the same day as JP Morgan. But instead, we could actually do it in the same park as JP Morgan a month later, which gave me a tiny little bit more breathing room. Yeah, nice. which was very, very needed. It was kind of like myself, Sinead, Matthew, co-founder, and we have a fabulous intern called Ellie, kind of sat down and worked out a little bit of a plan of action. I think probably like the key tenets were there, like, how the hell do you convince 1,000 people to come along? Like, we know we've got a bit of brand awareness, but like probably not enough to convince 1,000 people to come along. And that was kind of more so on Sinead's side of, Sinead, do you think you're going to be able to make this go viral? Let's discuss how the hell we're going to do that. And then the second side of things is very much that, like, the logistics heavy side of things, the slightly boring things. And I myself did take on quite a lot of that kind of less fun stuff. There is just that, like, a lot of unspoken about logistics in pulling off large scale events.
Yeah, I did, and that's nowhere near of like putting your own event, but I did in my previous startup. I organized a booth for TwitchCon, and I did it all on my own, and I was like, I probably will never ever do it again. Like, no, thank you. So I can't even imagine like creating your own event. That is like a different ballgame. You mentioned something that's really interesting. You wanted it to go viral, essentially. Was that the goal of the event?
So the goal of the event was, if we get 1,000 people within the startup space there, you have then got this like critical mass of people that creates this amazing connection. I tend to find that with an event, there are so many different elements that make it great, but actually the hardest and best indicators of the event is the people that are there. So we knew we wanted it to be a celebration of startups, and it was kind of like, how the hell do you convince all of these people to get there? And one thing that I've noticed this year, like, definitely, is there is always a point of which that suddenly everybody wants to come. And that's the point at which you're kind of like 80% of the way there to hit your capacity. And in order to get that 80% of the way there, I think that's where marketing comes in. and really showing that they're like, the event is legitimate, it's exciting. And actually, if you're not there, you are going to be missing out, because they're like, someone from down the road is going to be there and everyone's talking about it. All of a sudden, they're like, you get a WhatsApp in your founder group chat being there like, is anyone else coming to Jumpstart's 5K? Yeah. And I think that for me is the point of success, more so than they're like the day itself, but like having that buzz within the startup scene within London was kind of their like the key aim there, is getting people talking about Jumpstart.
Yeah.
How much of that was like heavy lifting on your guys' side in terms of like building that hype? How much did you have to manufacture it almost, or was it none of that at all?
I think to begin with, it's very like had to come from our side. So like we started by targeting the startups who we already have relationships with, the startups that worked with us before. And then it's all about trying to like get those startups to post, which at the beginning was not easy, because if no one's talking about an event, why do you want to be the one talking about it? So I'd say at the beginning, it was kind of all on our side, making sure we got posts out on Matthew's account, which tends to like do very well, one of our co-founders. And then, like, as Emilie said, suddenly it literally felt like we turned up to work one Monday and everyone knew about this event. Like our signups really, like within the first week, we were all like, have we made a mistake here? Like signups were in, we're getting engagement on LinkedIn, but is that necessarily like turning into signups and people posting? And as soon as we kind of managed to tip past that point, it went crazy. Like all of the posts that we've had post event have not come from us asking people to post. That's all been organic. But I actually think that also comes down to genuinely providing value. And Emilie's done such an incredible job over like the last year and a half of proving we can do that with the Jumpstart community. So people that have gone through the program. And we've learned from that if you give people events they care about, they will post and organically talk about it. So I think that was like a big part of this, of like create an event that people want to be a part of, that they really enjoyed, that they got value from, and then they will organically go and talk about it.
Yeah. And interestingly, events as a kind of like a community and marketing channel is obviously quite like a heavy input channel, right? From like the team. Taking it on the biggest scale, when and how did you decide that events is the channel for you guys?
The reason why events have kind of come so much more so into it is because looking at like the community that I was going to manage, I think if anything, it was more of a personal preference, is that I think that meeting people in real life creates a far stronger bond than it does offline. Slack can only go so far. Webinars are a bit boring. And actually, like, there is nothing better than they're like getting similar people into a room and seeing the way they connect. And that really encourages people to re-engage. And after every kind of large scale event, what you see is a spike in engagement. And for me, that was their like, actually, not only can you give people like in real life connections, what you can do is all of a sudden they're like in between having these events, you've got all of this engagement and you can use that as a marketing tool. And Sinead did some super interesting content analysis, like just on like the Jumpstart account, and having an event is like a great marketing ploy as well. So from my end, it was that I used events to drive engagement. And then Sinead could then use that engagement to drive greater engagement with the Jumpstart brand itself.
Yeah. I guess it almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, it directly corresponds to the brand's value as well, and the kind of positioning of your brand, which is all about kind of connecting people and making those, you know, micro introductions between in the community. So I think it totally makes sense.
Such a good point about like it linking to the wider brand. So I guess like so Emilie was already hosting events for like Jumpstarters within the community, and we were able to like test it kind of on a small scale. So Emilie suggested opening up the events to external people or non-Jumpstarters. And I think from the first time we did that, we were amazed at how quickly we sold out. I think we released like maybe 10 tickets and they sold out within like 10 minutes. That for us was a real lesson in how people perceived our brand and how we were coming across and maybe not realizing, which is really cool. I think for other startups, it's very industry dependent, but something I was always taught, like in my first job, I was given a book and it had like 19 different channels, and they're like, just try every single one. And like some are going to stick, some aren't going to stick. Kind of be clever in terms of which channels you're going to prioritize, but there's no harm in trialing channels. And I think, like Emilie was saying, the value of events is people actually are looking for those in-person connections. They're looking to learn, and it's a much bigger commitment, but a much nicer commitment, rather than spending sitting on a webinar, to actually come and meet people in like similar situations who are going through similar challenges, and kind of really building those relationships.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'd love to understand how you structure that kind of collaboration across the teams, but also, you know, how you plan it out within the marketing activations.
I think so. In terms of structuring it, as Emilie's kind of touched on, Emilie's was the lead on the event, and then it felt probably quite natural to bring me into it, given that this is like a bit of a combination of community events marketing. And then we had the brilliant intern Ellie, who honestly is the best intern in the world.
Shout out to Ellie.
But I actually think this has been a really nice project for us to work on, to learn to like collaborate more, because I think in a startup, and I think it's quite common to have 1 to 2 people in a team, and it can get hard to, it's very easy to get carried away with the work you're doing and not necessarily look up. And actually, I think it's been really nice to collaborate and realize how connected everything is, and then we're all trying to achieve the same things. I don't really know if that answers your question, but essentially it was me, Emilie, Ellie, and Matthew.
Yeah.
And did you guys have like a meeting prior to that event where you said, okay, these are our goals, this is what we're trying to achieve, or was it just a bit more on the whim?
So I would say that it kind of came from a sense of me looking at the event overall, looking at the timeline, and being there like, right, okay, if we want to hit 1,000 by X date, here's what we need to be hitting on there, like a week on week. Like, we need to launch from X date. I then basically said to Sinead, your whole role here is to make this like just basically see Jumpstart everywhere, because I know that that's going to be the point of which ticket sales will then fly. And then that alleviates my time away from ticket sales and onto the logistics and like all of the vendor management and sponsorships and partnerships, which we haven't touched upon yet, but I do think are really key within events like this. So like Sinead, I would say, kind of had full kind of, I don't want to say P&L, it's not P&L, but like full strategic view over, like, it was kind of there, like, I gave you the outcome that we wanted. And then like Sinead was there like, right, okay, what does that outcome look like on a week on week basis? What does that actually look like in terms of post, in terms of strategy, in terms of outreach? And Sinead actually did a lot of work with one of our key sponsors, Ulike, who has an incredible like marketing person there. So they're like working on content together and actually having a partner come on board to co-market with us, I think was really cool. And it's not something that we've ever done in previous events, which was really fun.
It was really fun. And like Emilie said, that really helped. And probably in one of your earlier questions about how we kind of reach that critical mass, I think having partners on board was really, really helpful there.
And if you were to say on the budget side, was this like a marketing budget, or do you guys have separate budgets?
We usually do have very separate budgets, but I think usually the way that my budgets are kind of defined are probably more in the sense of ROI from events, what kind of like engagement levels that gives to our current community. And then as well, when you like start to open up events, there's like additional ad values that you see there that are beyond the usual ad values of our like existing community. For an event like this, I would say that the two kind of like key outcomes were definitely brand awareness, which then sits far more on the marketing side, and like actually the kind of intangible benefits that we'll probably see over the coming months in terms of that, like, new startups approaching us. They're like from more of a sales and like BD perspective, which is kind of not directly either of our roles, but like a nice consequence. Meant that the budget for this was kind of, in a way, I don't want to say ill-defined, but probably like more flexible.
Loose.
But again, they're like partnerships and sponsorships work for like two key reasons. From a commercial perspective, and like trying to put an event on in London for less than a tenner is quite difficult. For all of our 100-person events this year, we've done that. From using sponsorships and for utilizing our network, and for really leaning into their like purpose-driven events that other brands buy into. And then for this event as well, actually, like the actual cost per head, once you take in all of the ticket sales and all of the sponsorships, was not far off that, which, when you consider the level of spend for an event of this kind, like just doing 1,000 units of anything is just crazy. So yeah, definitely sponsorships work really well from a commercial perspective, but I think they also really, really legitimize events. Getting Saint on board was wicked. Elite, again, they have such their like a brand connection to the running community. And then when you have the added fun thing of the fact that they themselves are a startup, all of the dots come together. And that's kind of how I look at event partnerships and sponsorships, of getting people on board that really resonate with the event purpose.
And how much do you think the quite large following on LinkedIn, and obviously your co-founder's quite large following on LinkedIn, helps with securing the sponsorships?
I think it helps in terms of brand recognition, like particularly in the last 6 months. I'd say it's kind of crazy to us that like I'll just be in like outside of work chatting to people, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of Jumpstart, I know like what that company is, which is like has happened very organically and potentially like without us really realizing. So I think in that sense, it's really useful in that that the followers mean that people are starting to know about Jumpstart. But I think it's probably, I mean, Emily, you did more of the partnerships, but I think it's more like people get excited about the event and what we're doing there, and like previous partners that we've had, and kind of get on board that way.
Definitely. I think that basically once you have one successful event that uses really great partners, that then just basically becomes your blueprint for being there. Like, here's what we did last time. This is why we think you would be great. What do you think? And actually sometimes, like, as a result of working with certain brands, other brands then reach out to you because they're like, oh, that's kind of like one of my competitors and that's pretty cool. Can we work with you guys? And so actually what's been really wicked for me this year is that the first time that I ever had to run an event on a really small budget, it was like, oh my God, who the hell am I going to be able to pull a favor from? Because we've never run an event and we've never used sponsors or partners before. So it was very much on their like goodwill and like getting people to buy into the event. And at that point, it's because I really wanted to launch a specific women in startups community, and actually speaking to like potential people around that, like why women and like why it's so important, meant that we were able to do that. And like as a result, the event was like the first one that we could like properly shout about on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
And the reaction that we had was like wicked, and basically off the basis of their like forming those relationships. And I think that relationship building really does come into it, and like shouldn't be ignored as part of partnerships. It's not transactional. It's like actually really connecting with that brand and with those people and with that venue, and choosing partners based on how they align with that.
There's obviously a lot of like insanely good content on LinkedIn from that event, and people have shared it. How did you plan the content strategy around that event? And kind of like, if you could take me back and take me through the content strategy at Jumpstart, like how do you plan it out? What goals you set for it? I'd love to just find out more.
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of the wider content strategy, when I joined, I'd say there was some kind of evergreen content that we knew did well and that we would repeat, like not repeatedly post, but kind of change up, but have those as core content pillars. So it was often to do with our candidates, so testimonials, case studies, kind of resharing stuff when people got jobs. So I think that's always remained important. I think one thing that sets us apart is we are kind of a people first company. We don't really see ourselves as a recruitment company, because we really do like care about our community which is obviously with them when Emily's job comes in. So I'd say that was kind of the core content, but there probably wasn't much structure around it otherwise. So maybe like a year ago or 6 months ago, I actually spent a bit more time like looking into the types of content we were posting and the types of content that did well. And from there, we were kind of able to extrapolate some core content pillars. So they're fairly like simple, I guess, like education, entertainment, community, and then you've got the more like salesy type of content. So those pillars kind of remain very core. I'd say one thing that's different with Jumpstart is we have obviously the Jumpstart LinkedIn account. We also have Matthew's, we have our other co-founders, and we have learned that different content does better on different accounts. So from Beer's account, doing really like education pieces for candidates tends to work really well. For Matthew, more of the entertainment style pieces in case studies on candidates, because he's trying to appeal to startups more, and then starts a bit of like a mix of that. And particularly like the community stuff does really well there. So I think like making sure we have that balance is a big part of our strategy. I always think I'm the worst person to talk about content strategy because I don't think I'm the most like, I'm not the best at it.
It's clearly working, so.
I know, right?
But I think just like having that mix of content across all channels is really important. But like Emily said, having community stuff, photos, like people is stuff that works particularly well. Like not relying on graphics, but actually like sharing photos of candidates tends to resonate more with people, which makes sense because you want to hear human stories.
And do you create the entire kind of content stack for the co-founders and for the brand yourself, or do you outsource it? What's the process like?
So it's me.
Wow.
But I collaborate with Matthew and Kabir on the content. So usually how it works is I will plan for a couple of weeks in advance, tending to leave gaps for any ad hoc bits and pieces that come up. And then we'll kind of at the beginning of each week or every other week sit down with Kabir and Matthew and outline the posts that I think they should be doing. And then in terms of like actually creating those posts, it's usually a mix. So I'll usually provide them with some guidelines and then they'll create that into their own tone of voice, because I think that is important as well. So that it's not literally just me writing on 3 accounts. And I think that's clear that then the content's not genuine or adding value.
And when it comes to prioritization for the marketing, obviously content is one of the channels. Do you do any experimentation around different channels, or did you hone in on the content and kind of growing your LinkedIn, for example? How is that working?
Yeah, so I actually would say content doesn't take up a huge amount of my time. That's partly because of how like been able to kind of, once you have the strategy behind it, it becomes easier to create that content. But yeah, we definitely do experiment with different channels and we trial different channels. LinkedIn is obviously huge for us, both in terms of the content, but also the job ads for attracting candidates at least. And then there are a couple of other channels that we use. I'd say the big one for us, particularly over the last 6 months, has been word of mouth and referrals. And that is in part obviously related to content, because like word of mouth, the more people are seeing your brand, then it's kind of feeds into itself. But I would actually say that it might look like we're a content first channel, but actually like it is, referrals are huge for us, word of mouth is huge for us, and then a couple of other channels to support it. But increasingly, particularly for our generalist stream, it is like quite organic now, which is a really exciting place to be, because it gives us time and space to experiment with events.
If you could take me through like how much time do you spend on strategy versus implementation? Because I think that's something super interesting for other startup marketers, because there doesn't seem to be like a golden rule, right?
Yeah, I have fallen into that trap so many times of getting so stuck in the day-to-day and feeling unable to kind of get your head above water and breathe.
Yeah.
I think partly it's a time in the role. So I think when I joined, probably every catch up I had with Emily would be like, I'm so stuck in my BAU, like I can't think of the big picture. So that like partly it is just time and kind of getting to grips with the core channels, or like the core, like the stuff that's already going on. Like once you can do that well, it becomes much easier to think about strategy. I'd say now probably, and it also depends on like what's going on and what projects we're working on. It's maybe like maybe it's like a 60% of my weeks on execution and 40% of it's like actually trying to think about the bigger picture. But like some weeks it will be all strategy, and other weeks it will be like all execution. Do you think it's important to mark out that time? And I think like it's the strategy side of things and looking at the data that I find most interesting. It's the part of it, like the marketing, that I find like the reason I essentially work in it. So definitely is important just to sometimes take a pause, take a step back, and even just ask yourself the question, like, why are we running this channel? Like, what's the whole point of this campaign? I think the like strategy can sometimes get a bit freaked out by the word because it sounds so big and proper, and you're like, if you Google it online, it's like, right, you need to write this 30-page document, and like, you just, in a startup, you often don't have time to do that. But like sometimes just asking a few key questions of like, who are we trying to reach, why are we trying to reach them, and what do we want them to do, can just help you like take a step back and see the bigger picture.
You mentioned also like the planning out of your time. Do you have, in terms of your like marketing tech stack, do you have any tools that you like really love that you could share with us as well?
Great question. So we are a Google heavy team, and so
G Suite it up.
G Suite all the way. There's nothing that can't do. So I'd say in this role less so, but in previous roles, it's more of a product tool, but I love it. Mixpanel. I find that really, really great for like kind of just analyzing user data and website data. And LogRocket. I personally nosing on what people are doing on your website and really like watching user behavior. But that's really great in terms of the insights you can actually gather, particularly if you're working on a product or you're looking to like implement website changes. You can just gather a lot from watching what people are doing. So I'd say those are kind of two of my favorite that I don't use at the moment, but if you're in a product-based marketing role, potentially more relevant. But otherwise, Airtable is great. But I think marketing tools are great, but also they can be like overcomplicated. You don't need like every single tool. You can do a lot with not a lot.
And what do you use currently for content, whether it's written or visual?
So Canva for designing stuff, and then in terms of like actually creating content, Google Sheets, not Sheets, what was it? Google Docs. Actually, I think ChatGPT as well is like shouldn't be underestimated, and how useful that can be just for like getting the first few steps of a piece of content, like kind of getting you jump started. Emilie is great at writing content, and I think is really good at ChatGPT.
I think what Sinead means is probably not so much I'm great at writing content, but I think like over the last year and a half, what I've really found is they're like a tone of voice that really resonates with the community. So I mean, they're like a lot of what I do is like newsletter writing, and I think to begin with I was so overly old Jumpstart, which is just they're like a lot of emojis. And actually, I think, and interestingly, I actually can see this now reflected over our LinkedIn as well, is that the tone of voice has become like far more like dry, not dry in like a boring way, but like dry, witty dry. Little bit they're like sarcastic, little bit slow it down, maybe throw a swear word in your emails if you're feeling crazy. Like people kind of underestimate that they're like writing as if you would kind of write to your friend with the right audience is the right way to write. And actually, I think particularly within startups, and you do see like loads of brands doing it now, just being they're like very to the point, very, all right, mate, do you want to go to the pub? That kind of language, rather than please come and use my shiny new product. And it is amazing because of X and Y and Z. And I kind of feel like that type of copy and content is kind of moved away now, and people really want that genuine little bit.
I also think it's because you're so close to your users or like your audience, because you spend time, like literally physically spend time with them, that you kind of understand them really well, and that helped you with that kind of tone of voice development.
Definitely. And I think that I probably wouldn't do it to a bunch of strangers, but I think they're like, there's an element that because I know the people that I'm sending it out to, it feels natural and it feels like you can do that. And I think on their end receiving it, they're like, oh, that is so Emily. Like it feels very genuine because that is the way that I talk and it is probably the way that I behave. But I also think that it probably does work in that broader context. And like, I think definitely from like the Jumpstart LinkedIn, the way that like that tone of voice now comes across is like probably not to the extent of dry and like sarcasm that I go to, but it kind of fits that mid-tone that is there like able to be online as well.
That is really interesting. So you essentially have two separate marketings or outreach. Is that fair to say?
Kind of. It's kind of their like inner facing, like internal marketing and like external facing marketing, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. There's kind of like a lot of what you do in the community is like marketing work, but it is like for Jumpstarters versus like the stuff that gets pushed out to an external audience.
I guess the way that I would kind of split it is that like Sinead's goal is to like drive more affiliation with Jumpstart, and like mine in a way is to maintain and grow the affiliation with Jumpstart that already exists. So I think like the reason why people like Jumpstart is yes, they get a really cool job, but they don't just get a job and say like good luck, see you later. It's they're like they get the job and then for the next however long of their career, like we have people who came through the program in our very first cohort that still come along to drinks and like come to our Women in Startups Run Club, and it's like that affiliation with Jumpstart stays with them, and like as a result 5 of their friends are also now in the Jumpstart community because they've all come through the program, and like there is a real value to driving and continuing that affiliation with the brand as that support system that is the human touch beyond just the process of getting the job, but staying within the job and also supporting them throughout their career, whether that means that they're getting promotions or actually changing roles, is that you're still there to like support them and guide them and like be there when they need it.
And how much of your co-founders' involvement is in the strategy for like the community and marketing, or do they just say, you know, guys, you're the expert?
I think from a marketing perspective at least, and this probably is somewhat related to the community, but I'll let you take the community side. Matthew and Kabir set kind of the big strategic goals that we're working on for the quarter or however long that is, and we often plan these out in away days, so we meet once a quarter as a team to essentially chat strategy all morning and then do something fun in the afternoon. So it's always nice because it doesn't feel completely random. It's not like, by the way, these are the goals. So that kind of sets the general direction, and then in terms of more of the like what that strategy means to achieve that, I would say that's more individual and more kind of you listening to that. And then so like from my side, it's like listen to the big goals and then set strategy from that, obviously in collaboration with like
I think it's wicked because it is very much they're like, this is the overall outcome that we want, and here's a whole load of responsibility to their like for you to go off and build that in whatever way you think is going to come to that like outcome. So it's a lot of kind of freedom to shape it in whatever way produces that outcome, which is fun because like you can be really creative about it, and you can be there like, okay, cool, that could be the budget for one event, but if I really try and stretch it, I can make it into 5 events. So I'm going to do 5 events. Like, it is fun because it's like you can then be really, really creative, and you can stretch things and kind of push yourself beyond like what might be the norm. And I think what's so interesting about being one person teams is like it's actually really kind of hard to know what benchmark data looks like. And I think it's the same in any startup. It's like, well, we haven't built that yet, so we don't know what good in that looks like yet. So it's like a really, really fun challenge because you're constantly trying to find that like what great feels like and like what that might look like, and opening up like new opportunities. Like it's only this year that like marketing and community has kind of come together, and like you can see it now being more of like a brand awareness team, if you will. And again, that's literally just come as a result of jumping on different engagement and being there like, holy shit, this is really cool. This could work. Like,
Yeah.
actually, why don't we lean into this more? Because like this could be huge.
Awesome.
And it's really great because Matthew and Kabir definitely do give us the space to there, like, identify that and be there like, we think this could be really cool because look at all of
Can you remember like one experiment or one event or something that actually didn't go as well and you've learned loads from it? Like, has there been a point that you've experienced that?
This is like on a really small scale, but this is kind of drills home the point of sometimes you don't need to give everyone what they want. Everyone was like, I'd love a book club. I would love a book club, right? I was like, yeah, very sweet, very wholesome, very low lip.
Yeah.
2 people came to book club. I was like, right, never again.
Yeah.
And it's fine because it's where like, actually, sometimes people will say that they want 100 initiatives.
Yeah.
And actually, what I've kind of realized, and actually Matthew is very good at being like this. He's like, you can give people 10 initiatives, but then you're actually just spreading them out over 10 things and whittling that down into kind of 2 key things, which is career support, which is mainly about relationship, is like a really engagement, and it's like a really strong value for people in the community, and events, because they get to meet amazing people, they get to hear from amazing people, and you get that kind of community feel. And you can probably remove everything else. I wouldn't want to, because I do like doing all the extra stuff, but I think those are really, they're like the 2 big values, and book club unfortunately doesn't go into that.
No. Actually, one more thing. If you could recommend any sort of podcast, doesn't have to be marketing related, like what's you're into right now, any books, you know, Emily in Paris type of vibe, that's, you know, anything that you're into.
Oh, great question. Oh, actually, it's a new podcast called Perfect Day, or The Perfect Day. And I can't remember her name, but it's by a comedian, and they essentially, it's a bit like Off Menu, but it's about like your perfect day. So you describe your perfect like morning, afternoon, and evening. And I've listened to 2 episodes. I think there are 3 out so far. And it's just hilarious. You know, like you're just listening to it, you're laughing the whole time, get some fun insights about people.
Yeah.
And I've now like been very stressed trying to plan out my own perfect day. Like I'm going to be advised on this. I'm like, what if I one day get picked?
Love it.
Love that. I'm actually a big Off Menu fan,
Nice.
but the other one as well is actually Table Manners, Jessie Ware. I just like love seeing that relationship between mother and daughter. Like they're so funny.
Yeah. Her mum is just like from a different planet, but I love it. Well, thank you so much, girls. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll be in touch. I'll definitely be in touch. If it's not about this, I'll be in touch about events.
Perfect.
I love it. Thanks so much. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, I know. I want to say let's do it again, but I don't want to take your time because I know you're busy. So maybe in a couple weeks' time we do a follow-up.
Nice.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Thanks so much.
Bye.